The wine glass trembled in my hand as I stared at the lipstick stain on my husband's collar. For 15 years, I'd been the perfect corporate wife to James, supporting his ambitions, hosting dinner parties for clients, sacrificing my own career. Dreams. Now, a single smudge of crimson had shattered our carefully constructed world, and with it, the blindfold I'd willingly worn for far too long. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca, my best friend Olivia waved her hand in front of my face. You've been staring at that shirt for 10 minutes. Talk to me. I placed the wine glass down on my marble kitchen counter before I could drop it. It's happening again, Liv, but this time it's different. My name is Rebecca Morgan, and 6 months ago I thought I had everything figured out. James and I met in business school, both of us ambitious and driven. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of building something extraordinary. When he was offered a position at Everett Capital, a prestigious investment firm in Boston, we were ecstatic. I still remember the night he proposed. "We're going to conquer the world together, Becca," he'd promised, slipping the diamond ring on my finger. "Everything I build will be for us." Funny how words can take on new meanings with time. After graduation, I put my own career ambitions on hold to support his. It wasn't a sacrifice, I told myself. It was an investment in our future. I became his sounding board, his unofficial business advisor, the one who helped him rehearse presentations and finesse client pitches. Behind every successful man, isn't that what they say? 15 years flew by. James became the youngest managing partner at Everett Capital, then eventually bought out the retiring founder. Our lives became a whirlwind of charity galas, country club memberships, and vacation homes. From the outside, we had it all. What no one knew was that James's name might have been on the company documents, but I was the one who had used my family's inheritance to provide the capital. My grandfather had left me a substantial trust fund with one condition. I couldn't touch it until I was 35, unless it was for a business investment. When James needed money to buy into the firm, I didn't hesitate. We were partners in every sense of the word. "It's a silent investment," James had insisted. "People need to see me as self-made. You understand, right?" And I did. I signed the documents without reading the fine print. Love makes you do foolish things. The first sign of trouble came 3 months ago when James hired Jennifer Hayes as his new executive assistant. Young, ambitious, with a marketing degree, and legs that seemed to stretch for miles. "She's brilliant, Becca," James had gushed over dinner. "Her ideas for expanding the firm's client base are revolutionary." I'd nodded, pushing down the unease crawling up my spine. I'd seen the way he looked at her during the company Christmas party, the same way he once looked at me. Olivia placed a fresh glass of wine in my hand, pulling me back to the present. "So this time it's different, how?" I lifted the shirt, the smell of unfamiliar perfume making my stomach turn. "Because this time, I'm done pretending. This time I'm going to remind James exactly who built his precious company." The next morning, I sat in my home office, staring at the mosaic of photos on my wall. James and me cutting the ribbon at the opening of the new Everett Capital offices, the two of us on our 10th anniversary trip to the Maldives, us beaming, at the Finance Industry Awards where he'd been named Entrepreneur of the Year. All these years, I'd told myself that our partnership was equal, that my contributions were valued even if they weren't public. Now the truth hit me like a slap. I'd been nothing more than a convenient ATM and a trophy wife. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I typed back, "Client dinner?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Strategy meeting with Jennifer. Big potential client. Of course. I put down the phone and pulled open my desk drawer, removing a folder I hadn't touched in 15 years. Inside were the original investment documents for Everett Capital. I'd signed them in a blur of trust and excitement, but now I read every word, my heart pounding harder with each paragraph. One section in particular caught my eye. In the event of company sale, dissolution, or change in leadership structure, all major decisions require approval of both majority shareholders. Both majority shareholders. I pulled up our investment records, tracing the money flows from my trust fund to the company accounts. 70% of the initial capital had come from me. I wasn't just an investor, I was the majority owner. James had always managed the business side, handling the paperwork and filings. Had he conveniently forgotten this detail? Or was it something more calculated? I called our family lawyer, Martin, asking him to verify the company ownership structure, without alerting James. "Rebecca," Martin said, his voice careful, "according to the official records, James owns 51% of Everett Capital." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I provided most of the capital. The records show a transfer of shares 5 years ago. Your signature is on the documents." "I never signed anything like that," I whispered, realization dawning. "The anniversary, trip to the Maldives." The stack of routine business documents James had asked me to sign while we sipped champagne on the beach. "I'll need to look into this further," Martin cautioned. "If you're saying those signatures were obtained fraudulently..." "Do it," I said, a strange calm settling over me. And Martin, absolute discretion. After hanging up, I sat motionless, the pieces clicking into place. James's sudden insistence on opening a new branch office in Chicago, the mysterious business trips that always seemed to coincide with Jennifer's absences from the office, the way he'd been distant, preoccupied. He was planning his exit with her and with my company. I picked up a framed photo from my desk. Our wedding day. James looked at me with such love, such promise. Had it all been a calculation from the beginning? A handsome, ambitious man with big dreams but no capital, finding the perfect partner with money but no ego to demand recognition? In that moment, something hardened inside me. The Rebecca who had supported from the shadows, who had smiled and nodded and trusted without question, she disappeared. In her place stood someone new, someone with ice in her veins and 15 years of business acumen no one had bothered to notice. I opened my laptop and began to research everything about Jennifer Hayes. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, digital breadcrumbs that told her story. 28, graduated from Northeastern, previously worked at 2 smaller investment firms. Ambitious by all accounts. But was she in love? Or was she like James, just following the money? My phone rang. Olivia. "I did some digging," she said without preamble. "They've been seen at Maison Rouge 3 times in the past month. The intimate French restaurant on the waterfront. James had taken me there once, for our anniversary, complaining about the prices the entire time. There's more," Olivia continued. "Rachel from accounting says James has been moving money around, setting up new corporate entities. Olivia's husband worked at Everett Capital too. Her network of informants within the company had always been impressive." "When?" I asked. "Started about 3 months ago, right after he hired her." The timeline matched perfectly. I thanked Olivia and hung up, my mind racing. I needed evidence, something concrete. But more importantly, I needed to understand the legal structure of what James had built, or rather, what we had built. I spent the next week in reconnaissance mode. I hired a private investigator to track James's movements. I scheduled lunch with the firm's accountant under the guise of discussing our personal taxes. I began cataloging our assets, creating a detailed map of our financial entanglements. James remained oblivious, his attention focused on Jennifer and whatever future he was planning. He came home later each night, distracted and distant. Once, his phone buzzed during dinner. and I caught a glimpse of Jennifer's name before he hurriedly turned it over. "Important client?" I asked innocently. "Just work stuff," he muttered. I smiled and poured more wine, let him think I was clueless. Let him underestimate me, as he always had. The private investigator delivered his report after 10 days. Photos of James and Jennifer entering a high-rise apartment building in Back Bay, dinner reservations, weekend trips to a bed and breakfast in Vermont, and, most damning of all, emails discussing the Chicago expansion and plans to relocate there together once the situation was handled. The situation, I presumed, was me. Martin called the same day. "Rebecca, I've confirmed your suspicions. The share transfer documents appear to have been slipped in among other papers. If you want to pursue this legally—" "Not yet," I interrupted. "I need more time." I had spent 15 years being the perfect corporate wife, the supportive partner. Now I was going to use everything I'd learned to take back what was mine. The next morning, I dressed with particular care. A sharp charcoal Armani suit I knew commanded attention. I drove to Everett Capital and walked through the front doors for the first time in months. The receptionist looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Morgan, we weren't expecting you today." "I thought I'd surprise James," I said with a warm smile. "Is he in?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "He's in a meeting with Ms. Hayes, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind." "Perfect." I moved toward his office before she could finish, my heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. I could hear their voices through the door, laughing, intimate. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. James froze mid-sentence, his expression shifting from annoyance to surprise to forced pleasure in the span of seconds. Jennifer sat too close to him on the leather sofa, a portfolio spread between them. She moved away slightly, professional, mask sliding into place. "Rebecca, what a surprise." James stood, crossing to kiss my cheek. I turned subtly, his lips landing near my ear instead. "I thought we could have lunch," I said brightly. "It's been ages since I've seen the office." "Hello, Jennifer." "Mrs. Morgan," she nodded, perfectly composed. "I was just leaving. We've finished our discussion." Was that guilt in her eyes, or simply annoyance at the interruption? "Actually," I said, "I'd love your input too, Jennifer. James always speaks so highly of your business acumen." They exchanged a quick glance, too quick, but I caught it. Uncertainty, concern. Perfect. "What's this about, Becca?" James asked, using his indulgent husband voice, the one that said, "Isn't she cute?" thinking she understands business. "The Chicago expansion," I said casually. "I've been thinking it's a fantastic opportunity. In fact, I'd like to be more involved." Jennifer's professional smile faltered. James's jaw tightened. "It's still in the planning stages," he said carefully. "Nothing's finalized." "Even better. I can help shape it from the ground up. After all—" I perched on the edge of his desk, picking up a deal tombstone paperweight. "Everett Capital has always been our shared vision, hasn't it, darling?" The emphasis on "our" wasn't subtle. James's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course," he said smoothly. "But you've never shown interest in the operational side before." "People change," I smiled. "Isn't that right, Jennifer?" She stood abruptly. "I should let you two talk. James, we can continue our discussion later." After she left, James turned to me, the facade dropping. "What are you doing, Rebecca?" "Having lunch with my husband," I said pleasantly. "Unless you're too busy planning your new life in Chicago?" His face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" I stood, straightening my suit jacket. "Let's not insult each other, James. 15 years deserves more respect than that, doesn't it?" For a moment, he looked like the man I'd married, uncertain, vulnerable. Then the mask returned. "You're imagining things," he said coldly. "I have meetings all afternoon. We'll talk at home." "Will we? How refreshing." I moved to the door, then turned back. "One more thing, James. You might want to check who actually owns the controlling interest in Everett Capital before you make any irreversible decisions." I left him standing there, his face a study in dawning comprehension and alarm. The first shot had been fired. Now the real work began. That night, James came home earlier than he had in weeks. I was in the kitchen, cooking his favorite meal as if it were any normal evening. He approached cautiously, setting his briefcase down on the counter. "Rebecca," he began, his tone conciliatory, "I think we need to talk." I turned, knife in hand, calmly dicing herbs. "About?" "The company. Your visit today. These implications." I set the knife down, wiping my hands on a towel. "You mean my reminder that I own 70% of Everett Capital? Hardly an implication, James. Just a fact you seem to have conveniently forgotten while planning your future with Jennifer." His expression hardened. "That's ridiculous." "And regardless of the initial investment arrangement, the paperwork clearly shows—" "The forged paperwork, you mean?" I interrupted, my voice still pleasant. "The documents you slipped into that stack I signed in the Maldives? Martin's already confirmed they won't hold up to scrutiny." James's face went through a series of calculations. I could almost see him weighing his options, revising his strategy. "Rebecca," he said finally, softer now. "We've been together a long time. Every marriage goes through rough patches. If I've been distant, it's because of work pressures, nothing more." I almost admired his composure. Almost. "The lipstick on your collar wasn't a work pressure, James. Neither were the hotel receipts or the apartment viewings in Chicago with Jennifer." His eyes widened slightly. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been protecting my investment," I corrected. "Something I should have done years ago." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I once found endearing. "What do you want?" Such a simple question. What did I want? Revenge? My company back? The last 15 years of my life returned to me? "I want what's mine," I said quietly. "And I want you to understand exactly what you're about to lose." The board meeting was scheduled for the following week. James had been planning to unveil the Chicago expansion, his escape plan, and announce a restructuring that would have further diluted my ownership. Instead, he spent the intervening days attempting damage control. First came the flowers, my favorites, lilies, with a card apologizing for his neglect. Then the dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants, the surprise gifts delivered to the house. He was home every night, attentive, charming, the James I'd fallen in love with. I accepted it all with a gracious smile, playing the role of the placated wife while continuing my preparations behind the scenes. Olivia kept me updated on the office dynamics. Jennifer had been conspicuously professional, staying late but maintaining distance from James. They thought they were being clever, recalibrating, waiting for the storm to pass. They had no idea what was coming. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed in a power suit, navy blue, impeccably tailored. I arranged my hair in a sleek chignon and applied my makeup with precision. War paint, my mother would have called it. James eyed me over breakfast. "You're coming to the meeting?" "Of course, darling," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Didn't you say the Chicago expansion was our future?" "I wouldn't miss it." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. We drove separately to the office. I wanted him to have time to prepare whatever narrative he planned to spin. It would make the revelation all the more satisfying. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. 8 board members, all men, all James's golf buddies and business associates, plus Jennifer, sitting slightly apart with her tablet. presumably to take notes. They looked surprised to see me, but James had clearly forewarned them. Polite nods, careful smiles. Rebecca has taken a renewed interest in the company, James explained smoothly, pulling out a chair for me. I've always valued her insight. I smiled, taking my seat. How could I not be interested in something that's such a large part of our family legacy? James cleared his throat and began the meeting, reviewing quarterly performance figures, client acquisition rates, investment, returns. All impressive, all contributing to the story of his business genius. I listened attentively, nodding at appropriate intervals. Then came the Chicago announcement. This expansion represents a pivotal opportunity for Everett Capital, James explained, clicking through sleek presentation slides. The Midwest market is underserved by boutique investment firms of our caliber. Jennifer distributed folders containing the business plan. Our eyes met briefly as she handed me mine. What did she see? The oblivious wife? The inconvenient obstacle to her ambitions? Jennifer has been instrumental in developing this strategy, James continued. She'll be relocating to Chicago to oversee the launch, with my close supervision, of course. Of course. We'll need to restructure company leadership to accommodate this expansion, he went on. I'm proposing a new corporate entity structure that... Before we discuss restructuring, I interrupted pleasantly, I think it's important that everyone understands the current ownership structure correctly. The room fell silent. James's knuckles whitened around his pen. Rebecca, he said with forced patience, perhaps we could discuss this privately after... Why privately? I opened my own folder, not the one Jennifer had provided, but one I'd brought with me. Transparency is essential in good governance, isn't it? I distributed my documents to each board member. Gentlemen, you've been operating under a misapprehension. According to the original incorporation documents and investment records, I'm the majority shareholder of Everett Capital, with a 70% ownership stake. The room erupted in murmurs. James stood abruptly. These documents are outdated, he snapped. There was a share transfer agreement 5 years ago. Ah, yes. I smiled, sliding another document to the center of the table. Martin has prepared a forensic analysis of that agreement. The signatures were forged, the transfer never legally completed. I've already filed a complaint with the SEC. One of the board members, Thomas, adjusted his glasses as he examined the papers. James, is this accurate? Has Mrs. Morgan been the majority owner all along? James's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. A misunderstanding that my wife is exploiting to what, James? I asked softly. To reclaim what's mine? To prevent you from stealing my company while you run off with your secretary? Jennifer flinched visibly. The board members looked between us, comprehension dawning. Rebecca, James hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. No. I stood, placing my palms flat on the table. I'm finally standing up for myself. For 15 years, I've been the silent partner, the woman behind the man. I provided the capital that built this company. I helped shape the strategies that grew it. I entertained the clients who sustained it. And I did it all without demanding recognition because I believed we were partners. I looked each board member in the eye. That partnership is over. Effective immediately, I am exercising my rights as majority shareholder. James Morgan is removed as CEO of Everett Capital. The boardroom descended into chaos. James shouting, board members talking over each other, Jennifer sitting frozen in her chair. Through it all, I remained standing, calm at the center of the storm I'd created. When the noise subsided, Thomas spoke first. Mrs. Morgan, while these documents appear to support your claim, this is unprecedented. The company's reputation will be my highest priority. I finished for him. Everett Capital's clients trust our financial acumen. They value stability and integrity. I intend to provide both. And what about the Chicago expansion? another board member asked. Postponed pending review, I said firmly. All major initiatives will be reassessed by the new leadership team. Which is? James demanded. I smiled. Me, as interim CEO, effective immediately. A search committee will be formed to identify permanent executive leadership, though I intend to remain actively involved as chairwoman of the board. James laughed, a harsh sound. You've never run a company in your life. You'll destroy everything I've built. Everything we built, I corrected. And you'd be surprised what I've learned watching you all these years, James. I turned to the board. Members. Gentlemen, I understand this is a shock. I'm prepared to meet with each of you individually to discuss the transition and address your concerns. For now, I suggest we adjourn to allow everyone to process this information. One by one, they nodded, gathering their papers. James remained rigid, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. This isn't over, he said through gritted teeth as the room emptied. You're right, I agreed, gathering my folders. The divorce proceedings haven't even started yet. After everyone had gone, Jennifer lingered, hovering by the door. Mrs. Morgan, she began hesitantly. I want you to know. Save it. I cut her off. Clean out your desk. Your services are no longer needed at Everett Capital. Her composure cracked. You can't just fire me without cause. I have rights, a contract. I smiled thinly. Check the fine print, Jennifer. Executive assistants serve at the pleasure of the CEO. I'm now the CEO, and it does not please me to retain the woman who was planning to run away with my husband and my company. She left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood alone in the boardroom. 15 years of silent partnership finally ended. Through the glass walls, I could see the office in turmoil, employees whispering, James storming into his office, slamming the door. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Holy shit, Becca. You actually did it. I smiled, typing back, just reclaimed what was always mine. In the reflection of the boardroom windows, I saw not the perfect corporate wife, not the shadow behind a successful man, but a woman who had finally stepped into her power. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles, client concerns, divorce proceedings. James wouldn't surrender without a fight, and the business world could be merciless to women who upset the established order. But for the first time in 15 years, I was the one calling the shots. My company, my terms, my life. And nobody would ever mistake me for just a wife again. The days following the boardroom coup unfolded in a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. I had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. James had retreated to our summer house in Cape Cod, presumably to lick his wounds and strategize his counterattack. The silence from him was more unnerving than any outburst would have been. James Morgan was not a man who surrendered quietly. I sat in my office at Everett Capital, surrounded by the trappings of his success. Dark mahogany furniture, leather-bound financial tomes, framed magazine covers featuring his confident smile beneath headlines like Investment Wunderkind and Boston's Financial Maverick. Not a single photo of me adorned the walls, I realized. 15 years of marriage, erased from his professional narrative. The legal team is ready for you, my new assistant, Patricia, announced from the doorway. At 58, Patricia had been with the company since its founding, her competence consistently overlooked by James in favor of younger, more decorative staff. Her loyalty to the firm, rather than to James personally, had made her my first ally in the reorganization. Thank you, Patricia. I'll be right there. I took a moment to compose myself, straightening the Hermes scarf at my neck, a gift from James on our 10th anniversary. I'd worn it deliberately today, a small reminder of what he had thrown away. The conference room hushed as I entered, 6 lawyers sitting ramrod straight in their chairs. Half of them had been at our wedding, had golfed with James on weekends, had enjoyed the hospitality of our home at countless dinner parties. Now they regarded me with cautious, calculating eyes. "Gentlemen," I smiled, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's discuss our strategy." Graham Peterson, the firm's chief counsel, cleared his throat. "Rebecca, Mrs. Morgan, I must advise that this situation is delicate. James has retained Hadwick and Stern. They're alleging improper corporate takeover, emotional distress, and demanding immediate reinstatement." I raised an eyebrow. Emotional distress? From the man planning to abandon both his wife and his fiduciary responsibilities? Bold strategy. A few of the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to seeing this side of me, the sharp, unyielding businesswoman beneath the supportive wife's veneer. "They're claiming the original investment structure was a gift," Graham continued, "that you never intended to maintain ownership control." I unclasped my portfolio, retrieving a document I'd had Martin prepare. "Then they'll need to explain these," I said, sliding copies across the table. Emails between James and his personal accountant from 2008, discussing how to maneuver around Rebecca's majority ownership and gradually dilute her control without raising red flags. Graham's eyes widened as he scanned the emails. "Where did you get these?" "Let's just say that when your husband takes you for granted for 15 years, he gets careless about his passwords. James's ego never allowed him to imagine I might be paying attention." One of the younger associates let out a low whistle, quickly composing his face when Graham glared at him. "There's more," I continued. "James has been systematically moving company assets into shell corporations in preparation for the Chicago venture. Corporations where my name doesn't appear anywhere on the paperwork." I distributed another set of documents: financial records, transfer authorizations, corporate filings. Months of late-night research compressed into damning evidence of James's betrayal. "This is..." Graham struggled to find appropriate words. "Concerning." "It's fraud," I corrected. "Perpetrated by your friend and CEO against his primary investor, who also happens to be his wife. Now, I recognize that some of you may have conflicted loyalties in this situation. If anyone feels they cannot fully represent Everett Capital's interests, which are now aligned with my interests, I'll understand if you need to recuse yourself." Silence descended on the room. The attorneys exchanged glances, calculations running behind their eyes. Finally, Graham straightened his tie. "Mrs. Morgan, speaking for the legal team, we represent the company. If you are indeed the majority owner, then our duty is clear." He hesitated. "However, I should warn you that this will get messy. James has connections throughout Boston's financial community. He won't go down without inflicting damage." I smiled thinly. "I'm counting on it, Graham. The messier he makes this, the more he exposes his own misconduct." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "Prepare a comprehensive response to Hadwick and Stern. I want a full audit of all company transactions for the past 2 years, and I want it expedited, and begin proceedings to freeze any corporate assets that have been inappropriately transferred." As I turned to leave, Graham called after me. "Rebecca, James is scheduled to clear out his office tomorrow morning. Do you want security present?" I paused at the door. "No, I'll be there myself." That evening, I returned to our Beacon Hill brownstone, the house that had featured in so many society magazines as the perfect blend of traditional architecture and modern luxury. Every inch of it bore James's imprint, or rather, the imprint of the decorators he'd hired to create the appropriate setting for a finance titan's success story. I kicked off my heels in the marble-floored entryway, making my way to the kitchen where I poured a generous glass of the Bordeaux James had been saving for a special occasion. The irony wasn't lost on me as I took a satisfying sip. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "The office grapevine is on fire. Jennifer cleaned out her desk and left in tears. You're officially a legend." I smiled despite myself. Not my intention, but I won't complain. Another buzz. James called Daniel looking for dirt on you. Wanted to know if you'd ever confided anything he could use. Daniel was Olivia's husband, a mid-level manager at Everett Capital who had always been friendly but professional with me at company functions. What did Daniel say? I typed back. That the only thing you ever confided was how proud you were of James. Dan thinks you're the wronged party here. Most of the staff does too. I felt an unexpected warmth at this news. For years, I'd been James's wife at the company, floating through holiday parties and corporate retreats with a pleasant smile and carefully neutral conversation. I'd never considered that people might have formed their own impressions of me independent of James's narrative. Any word on where James is staying? I asked. Daniel heard he's at the Four Seasons. Apparently, Jennifer's been spotted there too. So they were already together, barely 24 hours after the confrontation. Their relationship was clearly more established than I'd realized. Had they been laughing at me all along? The oblivious wife funding their future escape? The doorbell interrupted my darkening thoughts. Through the security camera, I saw a courier on the front steps. I signed for the envelope, recognizing the Hadwick and Stern letterhead immediately. Inside was a settlement offer. James would allow me to retain 25% ownership of Everett Capital and a generous monthly stipend in exchange for my immediate resignation as CEO and chairperson. The final paragraph contained a thinly veiled threat about unfortunate public revelations should the matter proceed to litigation. I laughed out loud in the empty house, the sound echoing strangely in the high-ceilinged living room. Did he really think I would crumble so easily? That I would accept less than I was legally entitled to, out of what? Fear? Shame? I poured another glass of his precious Bordeaux and called Martin. They've made their opening move, I said without preamble when he answered. Let me guess, Martin replied. Insultingly low settlement offer with hints of character assassination if you don't accept. James always was predictable. I swirled the wine in my glass. What's our next step? We respond with evidence of his financial improprieties. The forged share transfer, the diverted company assets. We make it clear that any public revelations will hurt him far more than they'll hurt you. Do it, I said. And Martin, add a personal message from me. The wine you've been saving tastes exquisite. Morning brought a flurry of calls and texts. Board members seeking private meetings to clarify their positions. Business reporters requesting comments on rumors of leadership changes at Everett Capital. Friends, or people I'd thought, were friends, carefully probing for details of my marital situation. I ignored them all as I dressed for the confrontation ahead. I chose a crimson suit, the color of power, of blood in the water. My armor for battle. Patricia met me at the office entrance, her face grave. He's already here, she murmured. And he's not alone. I nodded, unsurprised. His lawyers? No. Patricia hesitated. Jennifer. So that was his play, flaunting his affair openly now, perhaps hoping to humiliate me into an emotional response. I straightened my shoulders. Perfect, I said. Let's not keep them waiting. The executive floor was unnaturally quiet as I walked toward James's office, Patricia a half step behind me. Employees pretended to be absorbed in their work, but I felt their eyes following my progress. The glass walls of the corner office revealed James methodically emptying drawers while Jennifer boxed his personal items. They were working with the synchronized movements of a couple accustomed to each other's rhythms. I rapped lightly on the open door. Good morning? James looked up, his expression hardening. Jennifer froze, a framed award half-wrapped in tissue paper in her hands. Rebecca, James acknowledged coldly. Come to supervise the eviction personally? I smiled pleasantly. Just making sure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. You seem to have trouble distinguishing between your property and mine. Jennifer flushed, setting down the award with shaking hands. I should wait outside. Why? I asked, stepping fully into the office. You're clearly comfortable helping. James appropriate things that aren't his. Why stop now? Rebecca, James warned. This is beneath you. No, James. What's beneath me is skulking around behind my back with your secretary while plotting to steal my company. I turned to Patricia. Would you please ask security to verify all items leaving the building today? We wouldn't want any company property accidentally mixed in with personal effects. Patricia nodded, leaving to make the arrangements. James slammed a drawer shut. This vendetta is only hurting the company. Clients are already calling, asking about the stability of leadership. I'm touched by your concern for Everett Capital, I said, perching on the edge of his desk. Particularly since you were planning to gut it for parts while running off to Chicago with your mistress. Jennifer flinched at the word mistress, but remained silent, eyes fixed on the half-packed box before her. It wasn't like that, James insisted. The Chicago expansion is a legitimate business opportunity, which you intended to pursue with company resources while diluting my ownership through fraudulent paperwork. I picked up a crystal deal tombstone from his desk. How am I doing so far? Accurate assessment of the situation? James's jaw tightened. You've made your point. Rebecca, you caught me in an affair. Congratulations. Name your price for a divorce settlement, and let's end this circus before it damages everything we've built. I laughed, the sound brittle in the tense atmosphere. That's what you think this is? About? Punishing you for an affair? Extracting a better divorce settlement? I set down the tombstone with deliberate care. This is about justice, James. About finally claiming what I've earned after 15 years of being the silent partner, the woman behind the man. You were never interested in running the business, he scoffed. You were happy with the lifestyle it provided. You never asked what I wanted, I corrected. You assumed. Just like you assumed I wouldn't notice your affair, or your financial maneuvering, or the gradual erasure of my contributions from the company narrative. Jennifer began edging toward the door. I should really stay right where you are, I said sharply. This concerns you, too. I turned back to James. I received your settlement offer. The answer is no. His confidence faltered slightly. Be reasonable, Rebecca. A protracted legal battle will only drain company resources and air personal dirty laundry. Nobody wins. On the contrary, I smiled, I win. I've already referred evidence of your financial improprieties to the SEC. The board has authorized a full audit of all transactions for the past 2 years. And as for personal dirty laundry, I'm not the one who needs to worry about that. James blanched. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag, retrieving a sealed envelope. Your emails to Jennifer make for fascinating reading, particularly the ones discussing how to structure the Chicago office to hide certain Ars creative accounting practices. I wonder how the SEC would interpret phrases like off-the-books arrangements and regulatory workarounds. Jennifer went pale. You hacked our emails? No need, I said pleasantly. James has used the same password for everything since business school. His ego never allowed him to imagine I might be paying attention. James lunged for the envelope, but I pulled it back. Copies have already been sent to our attorneys. This is just a courtesy, so you know exactly what you're facing. His face contorted with rage and something else, fear. You vindictive bitch. You'll destroy everything. No, James. You did that when you decided your secretary and your ambition were worth more than your integrity. I stood, straightening my suit jacket. You have 2 hours to complete your exit. Security will escort you both from the building. As I turned to leave, Jennifer finally found her voice. Mrs. Morgan, Rebecca, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. I cut her off with a raised hand. Save it. Whatever you felt or didn't feel for my husband is irrelevant. What matters is that you were willing to participate in defrauding this company, my company. That makes you complicit, not just the other woman. I walked out without waiting for her response, keeping my pace measured until I reached my own office. Formerly the CFO's space, which I'd claimed immediately after the boardroom confrontation. Only then did I allow my hands to shake, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally catching up to me. Patricia appeared in the doorway. Security is standing by, and Mr. Peterson called. The board has agreed to the emergency meeting tomorrow. I nodded, taking a steadying breath. Thank you, Patricia. Could you also call Olivia Davis? Tell her I'd like to meet for lunch. An hour later, I was seated across from Olivia in a small French bistro, far from the financial district, away from prying eyes and listening ears. You look exhausted, she said bluntly, studying my face as she poured us each a glass of water. Oddly enough, confronting your cheating husband and his mistress while fighting for control of a multi-million-dollar investment firm takes a toll, I replied dryly. But worth it to see his face when you walked in, Olivia grinned. Daniel? Said the office is calling it the Red Queen's Revenge after your suit today. I couldn't help but smile. Creative. They're terrified of you, she added. In a good way. The Old Boys Club has been running that place as James's personal fiefdom for too long. Our salads arrived, and I realized I was ravenous, having skipped breakfast in preparation for the morning's confrontation. So what's your next move? Olivia asked between bites. The divorce? I shook my head. The company comes first. I need to stabilize leadership, reassure clients, and get a handle on exactly what James has been doing with the finances. Once Everett Capital is secure, then I'll deal with the marriage. Smart, Olivia nodded. Cut off his power base before you go after him personally. Exactly. I took a sip of water. But I need your help with something. Olivia leaned forward, instantly intrigued. Name it. Information. The company perceives me as an outsider, James's wife playing at business. I need to know who's genuinely loyal to Everett Capital versus who's loyal to James personally. Who can I trust? Who's competent but overlooked? Who's been riding on James's coattails? Olivia smiled slowly. You're planning a complete restructuring. The company needs it, I said simply. James built his leadership team based on personal loyalty and country club connections, not merit. I need people who will see me as a legitimate leader, not a vindictive wife. Daniel's been saying for years that the management structure is top-heavy with James's cronies, Olivia mused. I can have him put together a breakdown of the key players, their relationships, their actual contributions. That would be invaluable, I said gratefully. And there's something else. Jennifer Hayes didn't appear from nowhere. She worked at 2 other investment firms before Everett Capital. I need to know if there's a pattern. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You think she's done this before? Slept her way into positions of influence? I think nothing about this situation is as simple as it appears, I replied carefully. James is calculating, not impulsive. If he was willing to risk everything for this relationship, there has to be more to it than physical attraction. Consider it done, Olivia promised. I have a friend at Hamilton Partners, Jennifer's previous employer. I'll make some discreet inquiries. As our plates were cleared, Olivia reached across the table to squeeze my hand. How are you really doing, Becca? Beneath the power suits and corporate warrior facade? The unexpected compassion nearly undid me. I blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed. I searched for words that wouldn't sound pathetic. I'm discovering that anger is a powerful motivator, and that I'm more capable than James ever gave me credit for. Than you gave yourself credit for, Olivia corrected gently. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had internalized James's narrative about me, the supportive wife, the social asset, the woman who didn't understand the complexities of high finance. Perhaps the most insidious betrayal had been allowing myself to believe it. "The board meeting tomorrow will be crucial," I said, changing the subject. "I need to establish absolute control before James can rally support." "What's your strategy?" "Transparency," I said firmly. "I'm going to lay out everything: the original investment structure, James's attempts to dilute my ownership, his plans for Chicago. Then I'll present my vision for Everett Capital moving forward." "Bold move," Olivia commented. "The old guard won't like having their comfortable arrangement disrupted. They'll like bankruptcy and SEC investigations even less," I countered. "And that's what they're facing if James's financial maneuverings are as questionable as I suspect." Back at the office, I spent the afternoon in back-to-back meetings with department heads, taking the pulse of the organization James had built. I discovered a company rigidly hierarchical in structure, with information tightly controlled at the top levels. Many talented employees had never had direct access to the CEO. Their ideas filtered through layers of management dominated by James's inner circle. By evening, I had a clearer picture of both the challenges and opportunities facing me. Everett Capital wasn't just suffering from James's recent ethical lapses. It had been operating under a flawed leadership model for years, one that stifled innovation and concentrated power in too few hands. I was reviewing my notes for the board presentation when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Boston area code. "Rebecca Morgan," I answered. "Mrs. Morgan," a woman's voice, professional but warm. "This is Diana Levinson from Hadwick & Stern. I believe you know why. I'm calling." "James's attorney." I straightened in my chair. "Ms. Levinson, I received your client's settlement offer." "My answer hasn't changed." "That's why I'm calling directly," she replied. "I'd like to meet informally, without your husband or your attorney present. Just a conversation between professionals." My instincts prickled with suspicion. "To what end?" "To explore whether there's a path forward that doesn't involve protracted litigation and potential damage to both parties' reputations and interests." A pause. "I've been practicing law for 30 years, Mrs. Morgan. I've seen how these situations typically unfold. No one truly wins in a scorched earth battle." I considered her words. Was this a trap or a genuine attempt at resolution? Either way, understanding the opposition's thinking could only benefit me. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., Westford Tea Room," I decided. 1 hour, off the record. "Agreed," Diana responded, sounding relieved. "Thank you for your willingness to talk." After hanging up, I called Martin immediately to inform him of the meeting. "It could be a setup," he warned. "James trying to get you to say something they can use against you." "I'm aware," I assured him, "but I'm curious what they're really after. The settlement offer was insulting. They must know I'd never accept it." "Be careful," Martin cautioned. "Diana Levinson hasn't earned her reputation by playing fair." That night, I returned to the brownstone to find James waiting in the darkened living room, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. For a moment, the familiar sight of him in his favorite leather chair sent a pang through me. Muscle memory of 15 years together. "Breaking and entering now?" I asked, setting down my briefcase without removing my coat. "I changed the security codes. It's still my house," he replied, his voice slightly slurred. "My name's on the deed." "Along with mine," I pointed out. "What do you want, James? I have a busy day tomorrow." "The board meeting," he nodded. "Your big power play." Something in his tone made me uneasy. "How did you know about that?" He smiled thinly. "I built that company, Rebecca. Do you really think everyone's ready to abandon ship just because you've staged a temporary coup? Is that what you call it when a majority owner exercises their legal rights? A coup?" I moved to the bar, pouring myself a measure of the same scotch he was, drinking. "And here I thought it was basic corporate governance? "You won't win this," he said, the casual confidence in his tone setting my teeth on edge. "The board, the clients, they're loyal to me. They know who built Everett Capital from nothing." "From nothing?" I repeated incredulously. "You built it with my money, James. My inheritance that you were so eager to get your hands on when we were newlyweds." He waved a dismissive hand. "Capital is meaningless without vision, strategy, relationships, things you know nothing about." "Then I suppose I'll have to learn quickly," I replied evenly, "starting with tomorrow's board meeting." He leaned forward, suddenly intent. "It doesn't have to be this way, Becca. We could still salvage something from this mess." "What did you have in mind?" I asked, genuinely curious about what he considered a reasonable solution. "A clean break. You keep the house, a generous settlement, a lifetime income stream from the company. I remain as CEO with controlling interest. We never have to see each other again." I laughed despite myself. "And Jennifer? Does she come with the controlling interest, or is she a separate negotiation?" His expression hardened. "Leave her out of this. She's not relevant to the business discussion." "On the contrary," I sipped my scotch. "She's very relevant. Your judgment in bringing your mistress into company business, in planning to use company resources to fund your new life together, that speaks directly to your fitness as a leader." "You're making a mistake," he warned. "If you force this confrontation, things will come out that neither of us wants public. Such as, your family's money isn't as clean as you pretend," he said softly. "Your grandfather's business dealings wouldn't withstand modern scrutiny." "Do you really want journalists digging into how the Morgan fortune was built?" The implied threat hung in the air between us. My grandfather had been a real estate developer in Boston's less regulated days, and rumors had always swirled about his methods. But James was fishing, I realized. He had no specific information, just general suspicion. "By all means," I said calmly. "Let's open all the closets and count all the skeletons. I wonder whose will outnumber whose." James stood abruptly, setting down his glass with a sharp click. I tried to be reasonable. "No, you tried to intimidate me," I corrected. "Just like you've been doing for 15 years, in ways so subtle I barely noticed. But I'm not intimidated anymore, James. I'm not the naive young woman who handed over her inheritance with stars in her eyes." "No," he said coldly. "You're just a bitter wife using business as a weapon in a marital dispute." "Is that what you've told yourself?" I asked. "That this is about hurt feelings and feminine vengeance? Not about the fact that you committed actual financial fraud? That you were planning to steal a company out from under its primary investor?" He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "You have no idea what you're up against, Rebecca. No idea at all." After he left, I stood in the silent house, his threat echoing in my mind. What did he mean? What was I missing? I called Olivia, suddenly urgently needing to accelerate our information gathering. "I need everything you can find on Jennifer Hayes," I said without preamble when she answered. "Not tomorrow, tonight. And I need to know exactly who on the board has been meeting privately with James since the confrontation." "What happened?" Olivia asked, instantly alert. "James just paid me a visit. He's too confident. He knows something I don't, or he's planning something I haven't anticipated." I paced the living room, mind racing. "The board meeting tomorrow," he practically smirked when he mentioned it. "Daniel's at the office late tonight. I'll have him do some discreet reconnaissance," Olivia promised. "And I'll start digging. On Jennifer right away." "Thank you," I said, relief washing over me. "I know it's a lot to ask." "Stop," Olivia interrupted firmly. "You've been there for me through 2 pregnancies, Daniel's career setbacks, my mother's illness. This is what friends do, Becca. Besides," her voice took on a steely edge, "I've watched James Morgan treat you like an accessory for 15 years. Helping take him down will be my genuine pleasure." After we hung up, I locked all the doors and activated the security system, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I felt in the large house alone. James's visit had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. The easy confidence in his manner suggested he had an ace up his sleeve, some leverage I hadn't considered. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. First piece of the puzzle. Jennifer Hayes isn't just a secretary with ambition. She has an MBA from Wharton and worked in private equity before joining Everett Capital. James significantly downplayed her qualifications when he hired her. I frowned at the screen. Why would James hide Jennifer's actual qualifications? What advantage did it give him to present her as merely an executive assistant rather than a fully qualified finance professional? Another text followed. And this is interesting. She specifically requested not to be listed as anything but his assistant in company materials, almost like she wanted to stay under the radar. The pieces began shifting in my mind, forming a new and unsettling picture. What if Jennifer wasn't just James's mistress? What if she was a strategic partner in whatever he was planning? Someone with her own agenda, her own expertise to contribute to the scheme? I barely slept that night, my mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. By morning, I had a new strategy for the board meeting and for my breakfast with Diana. Levinson. The Westford tea room was nearly empty when I arrived at 7:55 a.m., just as I'd hoped. Diana was already seated at a corner table, a sleek leather portfolio before her. She rose as I approached, extending her hand. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and shrewd eyes, she exuded the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect. "Mrs. Morgan," she greeted me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Ms. Levinson," I responded, taking the seat opposite her. "Let's be clear from the outset. I'm here to listen, not to negotiate away my rights as majority. Owner of Everett Capital," she smiled slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that." She signaled the server and we both ordered coffee. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. Your husband made a serious error in judgment, both personally and professionally. No one disputes that. Yet your settlement offer suggested otherwise," I observed. "Opening positions in negotiations are rarely where we expect to finish," she replied smoothly. "But I'm not here to discuss numbers or percentages. I'm here to talk about Jennifer Hayes." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about her?" "Do you know who she really is?" Diana asked, stirring her coffee methodically. "Besides my husband's mistress, I'm learning that her credentials are more substantial than James led everyone to believe." Diana nodded. "Jennifer Hayes graduated top of her class at Wharton. She worked for Goldman Sachs, then Hamilton Partners. She specializes in identifying undervalued financial firms for acquisition and restructuring. The implications hung in the air between us. She's not just sleeping with James," I concluded. "She's targeting Everett Capital for acquisition." "On behalf of Meridian Global," Diana confirmed, "one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. James hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been complicit in a corporate takeover attempt, one that would have seen Everett Capital absorbed into a larger entity, likely with him receiving a substantial payout, an executive position while my ownership was diluted to insignificance. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, studying Diana's face for clues to her motivation. "Because Hadwick and Stern also represents Meridian Global on unrelated matters," she said carefully, "which creates a potential conflict of interest in this case. One I've only recently become aware of." I understood then. Diana wasn't here as a peacemaker. She was protecting herself and her firm from the legal and ethical complications of representing both sides in what amounted to a corporate espionage situation. So Jennifer's relationship with James was initiated specifically to gain access to Everett Capital's internal operations and client relationships, Diana finished. a fact your husband only discovered very recently. I sat back, processing this revelation. James knows? As of yesterday, Diana confirmed, hence his visit to your home last night. He's desperate to regain control of the company, not just because of his ego, but because he now realizes he's been played as thoroughly as you were. And the board meeting today? I pressed. Diana hesitated, then removed a document from her portfolio. 3 board members have secretly agreed to vote with Jennifer's proposal, which will be presented by Roger Townsend, ostensibly as his own initiative. The plan calls for exploring strategic partnership opportunities with Meridian's Global. I stared at the document, a draft of the proposal with notes in the margins. How did you get this? Let's just say not everyone at Meridian is comfortable with Jennifer's methods, Diana replied. And I have ethical obligations that supersede client interests when fraud may be involved. The server approached to refill our coffees, and we fell silent until he departed. Why help me? I asked finally. Your client is James. My client is about to become a liability rather than an asset, Diana said frankly. And from a purely practical standpoint, you appear to be the more competent party in this situation. James allowed himself to be manipulated into nearly losing control of his company because he was thinking with the wrong organ. You, meanwhile, have demonstrated remarkable strategic acumen in reclaiming your rightful position. I couldn't help but smile at her blunt assessment. So what? The counterstrike I walked into the Everett Capital boardroom at exactly 9:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the scheduled meeting. The tension in the air was palpable as board members clustered in small groups, conversations dying as I entered. Roger Townsend, a silver-haired veteran of Boston's financial scene and one of James's oldest allies, watched me with barely disguised contempt. Beside him stood 2 other board members, Harold Dixon and William Bennett, both mentioned in Diana Levinson's documents as conspirators in Jennifer's takeover plan. What they didn't know was that I now possessed their playbook. Good morning, gentlemen, I greeted them pleasantly, setting my portfolio on the table at the head position, James's former seat. Shall we begin? They took their places reluctantly, the usual pre-meeting small talk notably absent. Patricia distributed folders containing the agenda and financial summaries I'd prepared overnight. Where is Martin Reed? Roger asked, glancing at the empty chair usually occupied by our legal counsel. Martin sends his regrets, I replied smoothly. He's handling another urgent matter for the company this morning. What I didn't mention was that Martin was currently filing emergency injunctions against the 3 board members present who had conspired with Meridian Global, based on the evidence Diana had provided. Before we begin, Roger interjected, I'd like to propose adding an item to the agenda. A potential strategic partnership opportunity has arisen. With Meridian Global, I finished for him, enjoying the flicker of surprise in his eyes. Yes, I'm aware of the proposal, Roger. In fact, it's already on our agenda under item 4. Discussion of hostile takeover attempts and corporate espionage. The room went deadly silent. Harold Dixon's face flushed red, while William Bennett suddenly became intensely interested in straightening his tie. I don't know what you're implying, Roger began, but I cut him off by sliding copies of Jennifer Hayes's real resume across the table, along with documentation of her connections to Meridian Global. Let's not waste time with denials, I said, calmly. Jennifer Hayes is not merely my husband's mistress or his executive assistant. She's a corporate acquisitions specialist working for Meridian Global, tasked with facilitating a hostile takeover of Everett Capital. Bennett cleared his throat uncomfortably. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Morgan. Do you have actual evidence of wrongdoing or merely circumstantial connections? In answer, I played an audio recording, courtesy of Diana Levinson, of Jennifer discussing Everett Capital's vulnerabilities with her supervisor at Meridian. The recording specifically mentioned the 3 board members present as being amenable to persuasion, with promises of positions in the restructured company. As the recording ended, Roger's face had gone ashen. This could be taken out of context. Could it? I raised an eyebrow. The SEC investigators might have a different interpretation, as might the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, which takes a particularly dim view of corporate officers violating their fiduciary responsibilities. Harold Dixon, always the most pragmatic of James's allies, leaned forward. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "Your resignations from the board, effective immediately," I replied without hesitation. "Signed and dated before you leave this room." "This is outrageous," Roger spluttered. "You can't possibly—" "I can and I will," I interrupted. "The alternative is that I release this evidence publicly, file criminal complaints, and ensure that your names become synonymous with corporate corruption in every financial publication from here to Wall Street." William Bennett, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke. "What assurances do we have that you'll keep this quiet if we resign?" "My word," I said simply, "and the fact that Everett Capital doesn't need the negative publicity any more than you do. I want a clean break and a fresh start." The three men exchanged glances, silent calculations passing between them. Finally, Roger nodded grimly. "I'll need those resignations immediately," I continued, pushing pre-prepared documents across the table. "Once signed, you're free to leave, and to create whatever narrative you wish about pursuing other opportunities." I watched as they slowly, reluctantly signed the papers. With each signature, I felt the balance of power shifting further in my favor. These men had underestimated me, had seen me as nothing more than James's decorative wife. Now they were learning the cost of that miscalculation. As they filed out, shoulders slumped in defeat, Patricia entered with fresh coffee and a puzzled expression. "The meeting's over already?" she asked, setting down the tray. "The preliminary meeting is," I replied. "Please call the remaining board members and executive team. We reconvene in 30 minutes. While waiting, I called Martin for an update. "The injunctions are being processed," he confirmed, "and I've sent formal notice to Meridian Global that we're aware of their activities and prepared to pursue all legal remedies if they continue." "Any response?" "Their general counsel called immediately." Martin sounded pleased. "They're claiming Jennifer Hayes acted without authorization and has been terminated. They're eager to disassociate themselves from the entire situation." "Convenient," I observed. "And James?" "Incommunicado since this morning. His attorney, not Diana Levinson, interestingly, but a junior partner at the firm, called to request a settlement conference." I smiled to myself. James was retreating, cutting his losses. "Set it up for tomorrow. And Martin? Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." "Don't thank me yet," he cautioned. "We've won the first few battles. But the war isn't over. James still has connections throughout Boston's financial community. And there's the matter of the Chicago property purchases." My attention sharpened. "What property purchases?" "I've been reviewing transactions from the shell companies James established. Everett Capital, or rather the subsidiaries he controlled, has purchased several properties in Chicago's financial district over the past 6 months. Significant investments, all handled very quietly." "For the supposed expansion," I murmured. "Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The properties are considerably more extensive than would be needed for a simple branch office. And they're held by a complex web of LLCs that ultimately trace back to both Everett Capital and a private trust in Jennifer Hayes' name." The picture became clearer with each new revelation. Not only had James been planning to leave me, for Jennifer, not only had she been working to facilitate a Meridian Global takeover, they had been siphoning company assets into their own personal real estate portfolio in the process. "Get me everything on these properties," I instructed. Values, purchase prices, current status. By the time the reconvened board meeting began, I had formulated a new strategy. The remaining board members, 4 men and 1 woman who had not been part of Roger's faction, arrived looking confused and concerned. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began. "As you may have noticed, we're missing some familiar faces today. Roger Townsend, Harold Dixon, and William Bennett have resigned from the board, effective immediately." Murmurs of surprise rippled around the table. "Why?" asked Eleanor Westfield, the sole female board member and the person I believed most likely to become an ally. "What's happened?" "They were involved in a conspiracy with Meridian Global to facilitate a hostile takeover of Everett Capital," I stated bluntly. "Working through Jennifer Hayes, who was planted in our company specifically for this purpose." I distributed copies of the evidence, allowing them time to review the documents. "My God," breathed Thomas Chen, our newest board member and the only one who hadn't been personally recruited by James. "This is stunning." "Indeed," I agreed. "But it presents us with both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is obvious. We need to stabilize leadership, reassure clients, and address the financial irregularities that have been uncovered. The opportunity is this: we can remake Everett Capital into the company it always should have been." For the next hour, I outlined my vision for the firm: more transparent governance, a flatter management structure that would empower talented employees at all levels, and a renewed focus on ethical investment practices. "This sounds revolutionary," Eleanor commented, "but also exactly what the company needs. The old boys network approach has been holding us back for years." "I agree," Thomas added. "But what about James? He still has connections, influence. He won't take this lying down." "James Morgan is currently facing potential SEC investigations for financial improprieties," I replied. "And his personal reputation has been severely damaged by the revelation of his affair with a corporate spy. His priority now will be damage control, not retribution." By the end of the meeting, I had secured unanimous support from the remaining board members for my leadership and restructuring plans. We scheduled an all-staff meeting for the following morning to announce the changes and address the inevitable, rumors circulating throughout the company. As the board members departed, Eleanor lingered behind. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "I've been on this board for 5 years. In all that time, James never once mentioned that you were the primary investor in the company." I smiled wryly. James preferred to maintain the illusion that he built Everett Capital single-handedly. "Well, for what it's worth, I think the company will be better off with you at the helm." She gathered her papers. "And if you need an ally in the coming days, I'm here." "Thank you, Eleanor. I may take you up on that." Alone in the boardroom, I allowed myself a moment to absorb what had just transpired. In the span of a few days, I had gone from betrayed wife to CEO of a major investment firm. The path forward would not be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt fully alive, challenged, engaged, and determined. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Board members spotted leaving. "You okay?" "Better than okay," I replied. 3 resignations secured, remaining boards solidly behind me. "Meet for dinner?" "Absolutely. Daniel wants to toast the new boss. Lady." I smiled at her message, grateful beyond words for her unwavering support. Then I called Patricia into the office. "I need you to arrange an all-staff meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Mandatory attendance, including remote employees, via video conference. And I'll need comprehensive files on all department heads and senior managers." "Already compiled," Patricia responded, placing a thick folder on my desk. "I anticipated you'd want to evaluate the leadership team." I looked at her with newfound appreciation. "How long have you been preparing for a change in management?" "Patricia?" A small smile crossed her face. Let's just say that not everyone at Everett Capital was blind to James's shortcomings as a leader. Some of us have been hoping for a breath of fresh air for quite some time. Well, you've got a hurricane now, I remarked. I hope you're ready. More than ready, Mrs. Morgan. Rebecca, I corrected her. If we're going to remake this company, together, we should be on a first-name basis. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. I spoke personally with our top 10 clients, reassuring them about the company's stability and outlining my vision for the future. Most were cautiously supportive, though a few, old friends of James's, were noticeably cool. By evening, I was exhausted, but exhilarated. I met Olivia and Daniel at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, away from the financial district and its prying eyes. To the queen of the corporate jungle, Daniel toasted, raising his glass of Chianti. May your reign be long and profitable. I laughed, clinking my glass against theirs. It's been 3 days. Let's not crown me just yet. 3 days in which you've outmaneuvered a husband who betrayed you, a corporate spy, and 3 corrupt board members, Olivia pointed out. I'd say that deserves a crown, or at least a really nice tiara. Daniel leaned forward, his expression turning serious. The office is buzzing with rumors. Some people are worried about job security with the change in leadership. They should be, I admitted, but not in the way they think. I'm not planning widespread layoffs, but I am going to be evaluating every member of the leadership team. Merit and results will matter more than loyalty to James or golf club memberships. That's going to ruffle some feathers, Daniel warned. Good, I said firmly. Those feathers have needed ruffling for a long time. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing insistently. Martin's name flashed on the screen. Excuse me, I said, stepping away from the table to take the call. Martin? What's happened? You need to see this, he said without preamble. James has just filed a lawsuit alleging that you coerced him into signing the original company documents under false pretenses. He's claiming that you misrepresented your inheritance and that he believed he was the majority owner from the beginning. Cold anger washed through me. That's absurd. There are bank records, transfer statements. I know, Martin interrupted. It's a desperate move. But it will create complications, potentially freeze some company assets during litigation. And he's giving interviews, Rebecca. He's going public with his version of events. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. Send me everything you have. I'll meet you at the office in an hour. When I returned to the table, Olivia took one look at my face and signaled for the check. What's wrong? James is escalating, I explained, gathering my coat and bag. He's filed a frivolous lawsuit and he's talking to the press. Daniel? Cursed under his breath. What's his angle? To destabilize the company, create doubt about my leadership, and force me into a settlement, I replied. Classic James. If he can't win outright, he'll burn everything down trying. What can we do? Olivia asked. I need to get ahead of this, I said, thinking rapidly. Control the narrative before his version takes hold. Daniel, can you discreetly find out which media outlets James has contacted? He nodded. Consider it done. And I need someone I trust inside the company right now, I continued. Someone who can calm nervous employees if word of the lawsuit spreads tonight. I'm on it, Daniel promised. I'll head to the office now, make some calls, keep an eye on things. Thank you. I squeezed his arm gratefully. Both of you. An hour later, I was back at Everett Capital, huddled with Martin and our PR director, Caroline Phillips, in the conference room. James's lawsuit had already been picked up by several financial news outlets, and his version of events, painting himself as the visionary founder betrayed by his vengeful wife, was gaining traction. We need to counter this immediately, Caroline urged. If we wait until morning, his narrative will be established. I agree, I said. Draft a statement emphasizing the facts. My initial investment, the documentation of ownership, and James's recent actions that precipitated the leadership change. What about the affair? Caroline asked cautiously. And Jennifer's connection to Meridian? I considered this carefully. Reference it factually, without sensation. Mr. Morgan's personal relationship with a representative of a competing firm created a conflict of interest that necessitated board action. No need to toss gasoline on the fire. While Caroline worked on the statement, Martin updated me on the Chicago properties. They're prime real estate, he confirmed. Current market value approximately $22 million. James paid $17 million using a combination of company funds and lines of credit secured by Everett Capital assets. And Jennifer's trust? Is co-owner? I verified. Of the holding company that owns the properties, yes. A very sophisticated arrangement that effectively concealed the connection until we started digging. I drummed my fingers on the table, thinking. So not only was James planning to leave me for Jennifer, not only was she working to facilitate a Meridian takeover, but they were also effectively embezzling company assets in the process. That's the short version, yes, Martin agreed. Can we use this to counter his lawsuit? Absolutely. It demonstrates a pattern of deception and self-dealing that undermines his credibility entirely. Caroline returned with the draft statement, which I reviewed and approved with minor changes. Within an hour, our response was being disseminated to media outlets, and I had scheduled interviews with the Wall Street Journal and CNBC for the following day. Around midnight, Daniel texted with welcome news. Most employees seem to be rallying behind you. James's reputation internally wasn't as golden as he believed. Lots of stories emerging about bullying, taking credit for others' work, etc. I wasn't surprised. James had always ruled Everett Capital as his personal fiefdom, rewarding sycophants and sidelining anyone who challenged him. What did surprise me was how quickly people were willing to share their true feelings once the fear of his retribution was removed. By 2 a.m., we had a comprehensive strategy in place. Martin would file a countersuit in the morning, detailing James's financial improprieties and conflict of interest. Caroline would coordinate our media response, emphasizing stability and ethical leadership. And I would address the staff directly, transparency being the best antidote to rumor and fear. I finally returned to the brownstone around 3 a.m., exhausted, but resolved. As I unlocked the door, a sense of unease crept over me. Something felt wrong. The house was exactly as I had left it, yet somehow different. I moved cautiously through the darkened rooms, flipping on lights as I went. Nothing seemed disturbed until I reached my home office. The door stood slightly ajar, though I distinctly remembered closing it. Inside, the room had been methodically searched, drawers left open, files rifled through, my laptop missing from the desk. I backed out slowly, heart pounding, and called the police. While waiting for them to arrive, I checked the security system. It showed no forced entry, which meant whoever had entered had a key or the access code. James. It had to be. What was he looking for? What did he think I had that was worth the risk of breaking and entering? The police arrived promptly, took my statement, and dusted for fingerprints, though I already knew they would find nothing useful. James wasn't careless enough to leave evidence. What troubled me more was the violation, not just of my home, but of my sense of security. After the police left, I called Martin despite the late hour. "We need to change the locks at the office immediately," I told him, "and update all security protocols. James has crossed a line." "I'll take care of it first thing," he promised. "Are you safe? Do you want me to send someone to the house?" "I'm fine," I assured him, though in truth I felt anything but. Just angry, and more determined than ever to see this through. Unable to sleep, I made coffee and settled in the kitchen, reviewing the events of the past few days. James is escalating. Desperation suggested I had struck a deeper nerve than I'd realized. This wasn't just about the company or even about Jennifer. There was something else. Something he feared I might discover. The Chicago properties were suspicious, certainly. But there had to be more. James wouldn't risk breaking into my home for information I could easily obtain through legal channels. What was I missing? As dawn broke, I showered and dressed with particular care, choosing a deep burgundy suit that projected both authority and confidence. Today would be crucial in establishing my leadership at Everett Capital. I couldn't afford to appear shaken by James's tactics. Daniel was waiting when I arrived at the office, looking tired but determined. "Security protocols have been updated," he reported, "and I've compiled profiles on all department heads with my personal assessments of their competence and likely loyalty." "You're a godsend," I said gratefully, accepting the folder he offered. "How's the mood this morning?" "Tense but curious," he replied. "Everyone knows something big is happening. The board member resignations, James's absence, your sudden emergence as CEO, plus the news of the lawsuit is starting to circulate." "Well, they're about to get clarity," I said, squaring my shoulders. "One way or another." The all-staff meeting was scheduled in our largest conference room, with video links established for remote employees. As I entered, the buzz of conversation died immediately, all eyes turning to me with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to outright hostility. I moved to the front of the room without hesitation, taking my place at the center of attention, a position James had always coveted, and I had always avoided, until now. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I know there have been dramatic changes at Everett Capital in recent days, and you all deserve an explanation. So I'm going to give you the unvarnished truth, because that's what I believe this company needs more than anything right now: transparency." For the next 30 minutes, I outlined the situation, my original investment in the company, James's attempts to dilute my ownership, the discovery of his affair with Jennifer, and her connection to Meridian Global. I explained the board resignations and my vision for restructuring the company's leadership. "Some of you have known me for years as James Morgan's wife," I acknowledged. "Others have never met me at all. You may be wondering what qualifies me to lead this company beyond my status as majority shareholder." I paused, meeting the gazes of those in the front row directly. "The truth is that I've been involved in Everett Capital's strategy and direction from the beginning, just never visibly. I've analyzed every quarterly report, reviewed every major investment decision, and helped shape the company's growth trajectory. The difference is that now I'll be doing it openly as your CEO, rather than behind the scenes." I could see skepticism on some faces, acceptance on others. It was a start. "I understand that change creates uncertainty," I continued, "and I know that many of you had good working relationships with James. I'm not here to demonize him or to demand personal loyalty. What I expect is professionalism, excellence, and ethical conduct. In return, I promise transparent leadership, recognition based on merit rather than politics, and a workplace where everyone's contributions are valued." As I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up around the room. I called on a young analyst in the back first. "Is it true that Mr. Morgan is suing the company?" he asked. "Mr. Morgan has filed a lawsuit disputing the ownership structure of Everett Capital," I confirmed. "It is without merit and will be vigorously contested. In the meantime, it will have no impact on our day-to-day operations or client relationships." A senior portfolio manager was next. "What about the Chicago expansion? Is that still happening?" This was trickier territory, given what I now knew about the real estate purchases. "The Chicago initiative as originally conceived is on hold pending review," I said carefully. "There were irregularities in the property acquisitions that require further investigation before we can proceed." Questions continued for another 20 minutes about leadership changes, client reactions, compensation structures. I answered, each one directly, refusing to hide behind corporate jargon or vague assurances. Finally, Eleanor Westfield stood up from her seat at the side of the room. As the most senior woman in the company besides myself, her support could be crucial in swaying the undecided. "I've been with Everett Capital for 12 years, she began. "I've seen strategies come and go, market cycles rise and fall. What I haven't seen until now is true transparency from leadership." She turned to face the room. "Rebecca has shown more honesty in 30 minutes than we've had in years of quarterly updates. I, for one, am excited to see where her leadership takes us." A ripple of applause started, spreading gradually through the room. Not universal, certainly. James still had his loyalists, but enough to suggest that the tide was turning in my favor. As the meeting dispersed, I found myself surrounded by employees wanting to introduce themselves, share ideas, or simply express support. It was overwhelming but heartening, concrete evidence that James's grip on the company hadn't been as absolute as he believed. By lunchtime, I was back in my office, reviewing the files Daniel had prepared on the leadership team. Some would clearly need to be replaced immediately. James's most ardent supporters who would resist any change to the status quo. Others showed promise. Talented individuals who had been overlooked or underutilized in James's hierarchy. Patricia interrupted my review with news. "Rebecca, the forensic accountants have arrived. They'd like to begin with access to the financial systems." I had engaged a specialized firm to conduct a complete audit of Everett Capital's books, with particular focus on the transactions related to the Chicago properties and any other irregularities. "Give them whatever they need," I instructed. "And please ask Caroline to come see me. I need to prepare for the Wall Street Journal interview." The conversation with the Journal was scheduled for 2 p.m., followed by CNBC at 4. These interviews would be crucial in shaping market and client perception of the leadership change. Caroline arrived with a folder of talking points and potential questions. "The angle they're pursuing is, 'Woman scorned takes revenge,'" she reported. "They're framing this as a personal vendetta rather than a legitimate business transition." "Of course they are," I said, unsurprised. "It's a more sensational story than competent majority shareholder assumes control of her company after discovering financial improprieties." "Exactly," Caroline agreed. "So our challenge is to keep redirecting to the business fundamentals while acknowledging but not dwelling on the personal elements." We spent the next hour refining my responses, ensuring I could maintain composure, even when questions veered into provocative territory. Just as we finished, Martin called with an update on the countersuit. "It's filed," he confirmed, "and we've included a motion for a temporary restraining order to prevent James from accessing any company systems or premises." "Good," I said, relieved. "Any response to our allegations about the Chicago properties?" "His attorneys are claiming the investments were legitimate business expenses related to the planned expansion. They're painting it as a witch hunt, motivated by personal animosity." I sighed. "Predictable. Anything else?" Martin hesitated. "There is one thing. The forensic team has identified an unusual pattern of transactions dating back about 3 years. Small amounts, relatively speaking, 50,000 here, 75,000 there, being routed through a series of shell companies before disappearing offshore." My attention sharpened. "Money laundering? Possibly. Or a slush fund. Either way, it's suspicious and potentially illegal." "Keep digging," I instructed. "If James has been using Everett Capital for illegal activities, I want to know exactly what and how much." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, processing this latest development. The picture of James's betrayal was growing more complex with each revelation. Not just personal infidelity, not just corporate espionage with Jennifer, but potentially criminal financial activities as well. Had I ever really known the man I married? The thought was still troubling me when I sat down for the Wall Street Journal interview. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wasted no time with pleasantries. "Mrs. Morgan, your husband has described your actions as a vindictive power grab by an angry wife. How do you respond to that characterization?" I met her gaze steadily. "I would suggest that financial documents speak louder than emotional accusations. The facts are clear. I provided 70% of the capital that founded Everett Capital. I am the majority shareholder. When I discovered that my husband was engaged in activities that threatened the company's stability and integrity, I exercised my rights as primary owner to protect the business, our clients, and our employees." "But the timing is certainly suggestive," she pressed. "You moved to take control immediately after discovering his affair with his secretary." "The affair was merely the thread that, when pulled, revealed a much larger tapestry of deception," I countered. "Jennifer Hayes is not simply a secretary. She's a corporate acquisitions specialist working for a competing firm, placed within Everett Capital to facilitate a hostile takeover. That represents a profound breach of fiduciary duty that no responsible majority shareholder could ignore." The reporter's expression shifted subtly, professional interest overriding the salacious angle she'd been pursuing. "You're alleging corporate espionage." "I'm stating it as fact," I corrected. "We have documentation of Ms. Hayes' employment history, her connection to Meridian Global, and her participation in acquiring properties in Chicago using Everett Capital funds, properties co-owned by a trust in her name." That caught her attention completely. "Are you suggesting embezzlement on top of espionage?" "I'm suggesting that the full extent of the financial improprieties is still being determined by forensic accountants," I replied carefully. "What's clear is that this situation goes far beyond a marital dispute or personal revenge. It's about corporate governance, fiduciary responsibility, and the future of a company that manages over $2 billion in client assets." The remainder of the interview followed a similar pattern. Attempts to draw me into personal attacks on James, which I consistently redirected to factual business concerns. By the end, I felt confident that the article would present a more balanced picture than James had hoped for. The CNBC interview went even better, with the financial focus of the network naturally steering the conversation toward the business aspects rather than the personal drama. I emphasized stability, ethical leadership, and our commitment to client service during the transition. By the time I left the office that evening, the narrative was beginning to shift. Financial news outlets were reporting on the complex leadership transition at Everett Capital rather than the revenge of a scorned wife. It wasn't complete victory, but it was progress. I had arranged to stay with Olivia and Daniel temporarily, not feeling safe in the brownstone after the break-in. As Daniel drove us to their home in Brookline, I finally allowed myself to relax slightly, the adrenaline of the day ebbing away to leave bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. "You were magnificent today," Olivia said from the front passenger seat. "I watched the CNBC interview. You looked like you'd been running the company for years." "In some ways, I have been," I replied, staring out at the passing cityscape. "I just never got the credit for it." "Well, you're getting it now," Daniel observed. "The tide is turning at the office. Even some of James's old allies are starting to distance themselves, especially after the news about Jennifer and Meridian broke internally." I nodded, grateful for their support, but too tired for much conversation. The events of the past few days had transformed my life completely. I was no longer Rebecca Morgan, corporate wife and silent partner. I was Rebecca Morgan, CEO and majority owner of Everett Capital. Now I just had to prove I deserved the position, to the clients, to the employees, to the financial community, and most importantly, to myself. The forensic accountants delivered their final report on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after I had taken control of Everett Capital. The boardroom was silent as Howard Brenner, the lead investigator, concluded his presentation. The damning evidence laid out in meticulous detail across 47 pages of financial analysis. "To summarize our findings," Howard said, his voice clinically detached despite the bombshell he was delivering. "We've identified a pattern of systematic fund diversion dating back approximately 5 years. The methods became progressively more sophisticated, evolving from simple expense mischaracterization to complex layering through multiple shell companies across several jurisdictions." I sat at the head of the table, my expression carefully neutral despite the turmoil churning inside me. The board members, now loyal allies after the removal of James's cronies, exchanged shocked glances as Howard continued. "All told, we estimate the total amount diverted from Everett Capital at approximately $12 million. The Chicago property scheme was merely the culmination of a long-term embezzlement strategy. $12 million. The figure hung in the air like a thundercloud, electrifying the atmosphere. $12 million stolen by the man I had trusted not just with my company, but with my life, my future, my heart. "And the legal implications?" Eleanor Westfield asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Howard adjusted his glasses. "These actions constitute criminal fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud given the interstate nature of the transactions, and potentially money laundering. The evidence is substantial enough that prosecution would have a high probability of success." After the meeting dispersed, I retreated to my office with the full report, closing the door against the world. I needed space to process not just the financial betrayal, but the devastating personal implications. For hours, I pored over the document, tracing James's descent from occasional financial corner-cutting to outright theft. The evidence was irrefutable, detailed. Transaction records, falsified accounting entries, emails between James and financial advisors in the Cayman Islands discussing how to structure the accounts to avoid detection. He had been meticulous in covering his tracks, but the forensic team had been even more thorough in uncovering them. Most painful were the timestamps on certain transactions. Money moved on our anniversary, funds diverted the day after I had undergone minor surgery, accounts established during the Christmas holiday we'd spent with my family. While I had been loving him, supporting him, believing in him, he had been systematically betraying everything we'd built together. A soft knock interrupted my dark thoughts. Patricia stood in the doorway, her expression grave. "Rebecca? I'm sorry to disturb you, but James is downstairs," she said quietly. "He's asking to see you, alone." My first instinct was to refuse, to have security escort him from the building, but curiosity won out, a morbid desire to look into the eyes of the man who had so thoroughly deceived me and see if there was any trace of the person I thought I had married. Send him up, I decided, and ask security to wait outside my door. While waiting for his arrival, I straightened my desk and my composure, determined not to let him see the devastation his actions had caused. I would not give him the satisfaction of knowing he still had the power to hurt me. James looked different as he entered, thinner, less polished, with shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. His bespoke suit, once worn with such easy confidence, now hung slightly loose on his frame. Gone was the arrogant assurance that had defined him throughout our marriage. In its place was something I'd never seen before. Desperation. "Rebecca," he began, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, but remained silent, waiting. Let him speak first, reveal his hand. I'd learned that silence was often the most effective negotiating tactic. "My lawyers think I'm crazy for coming here," he continued, settling uneasily into the seat. "But I needed to talk to you directly, without intermediaries." "About?" My voice was cool, professional, the voice of a CEO addressing a problematic former employee, not a wife confronting her husband. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly, together. "I want to make a deal. Drop the countersuit, call off the forensic investigators, and I'll withdraw my lawsuit challenging your ownership." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. You're 3 weeks too late, James. The investigation is complete. I have the full report right here. I tapped the folder on my desk. $12 million. That's how much you stole from Everett Capital. From me. The color drained from his face, highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, he seemed genuinely shocked, as if he hadn't realized the extent of his own theft when tallied in cold, hard numbers. "Rebecca, please," he said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "You don't understand the pressure I was under, the expectations, everyone looking to me as the financial genius, the market wizard." "Save it," I cut him off. "I'm not interested in your justifications." "It started small," he pressed on, as if confessing might somehow mitigate his crimes. "Just a little creative accounting to boost our numbers during the downturn in 2018. Then it became easier each time, and I had lifestyle expectations to maintain." "Our lifestyle?" I challenged. "Or yours and Jennifer's?" He flinched at her name. Jennifer's gone. Disappeared after Meridian cut her loose. She took what she could get from the Chicago properties and vanished. So the affair that had shattered my marriage had ended just as abruptly. There was a certain poetic justice in that, though it brought me no satisfaction. "What happened to 'we're going to conquer the world together,' Becca?" I asked softly, echoing his words from our engagement night. Was any of it real? Or was I just a convenient source of capital from the beginning? Something like genuine remorse flickered across his face. "It was real at the start. I did love you. But somewhere along the way, I started believing my own mythology. The self-made financial genius who didn't need anyone. Success changed me." "Success didn't change you, James. It revealed you." The words came automatically, a truth I had only recently acknowledged myself. He slumped in his chair, the last vestiges of his facade crumbling. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the scared boy beneath the man's exterior, the working-class kid from Dorchester who had clawed his way into Harvard Business School through scholarships and sheer determination, always afraid of being exposed as an imposter among the wealthy elite. That vulnerability had drawn me to him initially, had made me want to protect and support him. Now I recognized it as just another tool in his arsenal of manipulation. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice barely audible. It was the question I'd been wrestling with since receiving the report. The rational business decision would be to press charges, make an example of him, prove to clients and employees alike that the new leadership at Everett Capital would not tolerate ethical breaches of any kind. But was that what I truly wanted? More public drama, more painful revelations, more energy diverted from rebuilding the company to tearing down the man who had betrayed it? The thought of criminal proceedings, of seeing James in handcuffs on the evening news, of having our private life further dissected by the media, it exhausted me. "That depends on you," I said finally. "I'm prepared to offer you one chance, James. One opportunity to salvage something from this disaster you've created." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Anything. Name it. Full restitution of every dollar you diverted. Immediate withdrawal of your lawsuit. A comprehensive admission of wrongdoing to be shared with the board. And your complete disappearance from my life and from Everett Capital." He blinked rapidly, processing the terms. "And in return?" "In return, I don't press criminal charges. I don't provide the evidence of your embezzlement to the SEC or the district attorney's office. I let you slink away with your freedom, if not your reputation." "That's harsh," he murmured. "It's merciful," I corrected. "Far more than you deserve, and far more than you would have offered in my position." He couldn't deny it. We both knew the truth of who he was now, who he had always been beneath the charismatic smile and polished exterior. "How am I supposed to repay $12 million? He asked, a hint of his old arrogance returning. "Everything I have is tied up in Everett Capital and our shared assets." Not everything, I contradicted. There's your stake in the Chicago properties, held through your shell companies. There's the Vanguard account you've been quietly building since 2019. Yes, we found that too. There's the condo in Aspen you purchased last year without mentioning it to me. And of course, there's the $5 million insurance policy you took out on my life in 2020, with yourself as the sole beneficiary. His expression confirmed what the investigators had suspected. He'd been planning his exit strategy for years, accumulating assets beyond my knowledge while systematically draining the company. "What about the divorce?" he asked, trying a different angle. "My attorneys are already preparing the papers. Given the circumstances, I suggest you don't contest. Anything if you want our deal to hold." He nodded slowly, defeated. "And my personal belongings at the house? Have your lawyer arrange a time. You'll be supervised during the removal." I hadn't forgotten the break-in at our home. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. "Do we have a deal?" I pressed. His shoulders sagged in defeat. "Yes, we have a deal." "One more thing," I added. "I want to know why. Not the embezzlement. I understand greed. But why Jennifer? Why risk everything for her?" James looked away, unable to meet my gaze. She understood me. The real me, not the polished version I presented to the world. With you, I always felt like I was performing. The successful husband, the financial genius. With her, I could just be. The irony was almost painful. All those years, I had felt exactly the same way, performing the role of the perfect corporate wife while suppressing my own intelligence and ambition. "Did you know she was working for Meridian?" I asked. "Not at first," he admitted. "By the time I figured it out, I was already compromised. She had evidence of the financial irregularities. I convinced myself we could make it work. Take control of the Chicago operation together, build something new away from Boston." "Away from me," I clarified. He had the decency to look ashamed. "Yes." I stood, signaling that our conversation was over. "The paperwork will be ready tomorrow, and, James, if you ever try to cross me again, I will bury you so deep in legal problems that you'll need a mining crew to dig you out." After he left, I moved to the window, watching as he exited the building below, a diminished figure hurrying through, the rain without an umbrella. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of relief, regret, and an unexpected sense of liberation. The Rebecca who had entered that meeting was not the same Rebecca who now stood watching her husband's retreat. In that conversation, I had buried not just my marriage, but the last vestiges of the compliant, supportive wife I had crafted myself into being. In her place stood someone new, someone clearer-eyed, stronger, and finally free of the need for James Morgan's approval. I called Martin immediately to set the agreement in motion, then Olivia to share the news. "So, he's really gone?" Olivia asked when I finished recounting the meeting. "Just like that?" "Just like that," I confirmed. "Though I imagine the formal processes will take months to complete." "How do you feel?" Typical Olivia, cutting straight to the emotional core. "Lighter," I realized as I said it. "Like I've set down a burden I didn't know I was carrying. For 15 years, my identity was tied to his. Now I'm finally standing, completely on my own." "You always were," she said softly. "He just convinced you otherwise." Perhaps she was right. The woman who had used her inheritance to fund Everett Capital, who had analyzed investment strategies and helped craft client pitches behind the scenes, she had always existed. She had simply been hidden, even from herself. That evening, I sat alone in my office long after the rest of the staff had departed, contemplating the future of the company. My company now, in name as well as fact. The foundations James had built were rotten in places, corrupted by his greed and ethical flexibility. Yet the structure itself was sound, the business model viable, the client relationships mostly salvageable. Everett Capital needed renewal, not replacement. Like me, it needed to shed the toxic elements while preserving what was valuable and true. I began drafting a new mission statement for the company, one that emphasized transparency, ethical investment practices, and collaborative leadership. By midnight, I had outlined a comprehensive restructuring plan that would transform Everett Capital from James's personal fiefdom into a modern, principled financial institution. Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in implementing this vision. We instituted a more transparent management structure, promoted talented employees who had been overlooked during James's tenure, and implemented rigorous ethical guidelines for all investment activities. Daniel proved invaluable during the transition, his intimate knowledge of the company's internal dynamics helping me navigate the shifting alliances and lingering resentments. I promoted him to Chief Operating Officer, a position his competence had deserved for years, but James's cronyism had denied him. "I'm still not entirely sure what I did to earn your trust," he admitted during our first official lunch as CEO and COO. "You earned it by being the only senior manager who didn't change." "How he treated me after I took control?" I replied. "Everyone else either suddenly became obsequious or quietly hostile. You remained exactly the same. Professional, forthright, focused on the company's welfare rather than office politics." He smiled, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Olivia would say that's just because I'm pathologically incapable of office politics." "Olivia would be right," I laughed. "And that's precisely why I need you. I spent 15 years married to the king of corporate manipulation. I could use some straightforward honesty in my executive team." True to his word, James signed the easy restitution agreement, transferring assets including his stake in the Chicago properties to cover the embezzled funds. The divorce proceedings moved forward without contest, and gradually, his name faded from conversations around the office. There were challenges, of course. Some long-term clients, uncomfortable with a woman at the helm or loyal to James personally, took their business elsewhere. A few key employees resigned rather than adapt to the new, more accountable culture. Financial publications ran stories speculating on whether Everett Capital could survive the transition, often with thinly veiled sexist undertones questioning my qualifications. I weathered each storm with the same steady determination, neither discouraged by setbacks nor distracted by criticism. The company's solid performance spoke louder than any detractor could shout. 6 weeks after James's final visit, I received an unexpected call from Diana Levinson. "I thought you might like to know," she said without preamble. "Jennifer Hayes has resurfaced at a boutique investment firm in Seattle. Under a different name, of course, but same tactics." "You're still keeping tabs on her?" I was surprised. "Professional curiosity," Diana replied, "and perhaps a touch of guilt for not recognizing her scheme earlier. She's quite the operator, already cozying up to the male leadership." "Should we warn them?" I asked. Diana chuckled. "Already done, anonymously. Consider it my contribution to financial industry karma." I found myself smiling as I hung up. Jennifer Hayes had caused tremendous pain in my life, yet somehow she seemed pathetic now, constantly reinventing herself, moving from mark to mark, never building anything lasting. 2 months after taking control, I made a decision that would fundamentally alter Everett Capital's future. After extensive research and planning with the leadership team, I announced our new direction. We would become Boston's first major investment firm to focus exclusively on ethical and sustainable investments. The announcement sent ripples through the financial community. Critics called it naive, idealistic, doomed to failure. Supporters hailed it as visionary, exactly what the industry needed in an era of increasing social consciousness. "They're saying you've lost your mind," Eleanor reported after a financial services conference where Everett Capital had been the primary topic of conversation. Limiting our investment pool to only ethical companies? It's unheard of at our size. Exactly, I smiled, which means we'll be first to capture the growing market of investors who want their money managed responsibly. Sometimes being first to a new market is better than being the biggest in an old one. The strategy was risky, requiring us to divest from certain profitable but ethically questionable investments. For the first quarter, our returns dipped slightly as we repositioned our portfolio. I weathered board concerns and market skepticism with unwavering confidence in our direction. By the second quarter, the tide had begun to turn. Several high-profile institutional clients, universities, foundations, and progressive family offices transferred significant portfolios to us specifically because of our ethical commitment. A wave of talented young financial analysts drawn by our mission applied for positions. Business publications that had initially been skeptical began running features on the Everett Capital experiment and whether it might represent the future of investment management. 3 months after taking control, I stood before the board delivering Everett Capital's quarterly earnings report. The figures exceeded all projections. Client retention had stabilized at 97%, new accounts were growing steadily, and our ethical investment practices were attracting positive press attention. In conclusion, I wrapped up my presentation. Everett Capital isn't just surviving the transition, we're thriving because of it. Our ethics-first approach is resonating with clients. Our transparent management style has improved employee retention, and our financial performance speaks for itself. I displayed the final slide, a comparison of our returns versus traditional investment benchmarks. Despite the initial dip, we had rallied to outperform the S&P 500 by a modest but significant margin. Eleanor Westfield, now my board chair, smiled broadly. I think I speak for everyone when I say that your leadership has exceeded our highest expectations, Rebecca. The other board members, including 3 new additions I'd personally recruited for their expertise and integrity, nodded in agreement. Thank you, I said simply. But this success belongs to everyone at Everett Capital who embraced change and helped rebuild our company culture. After the meeting, Eleanor lingered behind. You've accomplished something remarkable here, she said. Not many people could have transformed a personal betrayal into professional triumph the way you have. I had excellent support, I acknowledged. And perhaps the motivation of proving James wrong about me was particularly powerful. She laughed. Well, whatever the motivation, the results speak for themselves. The Boston Business Journal wants to feature you in their Women in Leadership issue, by the way. I told them you'd probably be interested. 6 months earlier, I would have demurred, uncomfortable with the spotlight. Now I nodded confidently. Absolutely. It's important for women to see examples of female leadership in financial services. That evening, I returned to the brownstone, my brownstone now, redecorated to reflect my own taste rather than the corporate-approved aesthetic James had preferred. Gone were the sterile modern artworks selected to impress clients, replaced by colorful abstracts and photographs I genuinely loved. The formal dining room, rarely used except for business entertaining, had been transformed into my home office, with large windows overlooking the garden. The painful memories had faded, replaced by a sense of ownership and independence. This was my space now, reflecting my identity rather than supporting someone else's. Olivia and Daniel were coming for dinner, a small celebration of the successful quarter and my feature in the upcoming magazine issue. As I prepared for their arrival, chopping vegetables for a salad, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. I had lost a husband, but found myself. Lost the illusion of a perfect marriage, but gained authentic friendships and professional respect. Even the pain had been valuable, stripping away pretense and forcing me to confront my own strength. The doorbell rang, and I welcomed my friends with genuine warmth. Daniel carried a bottle of champagne, while Olivia brought a small wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked, accepting the gift. "Open it," she urged, eyes twinkling. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping, a small item from the business section reporting that James Morgan had relocated to Phoenix, Arizona, where he had taken a mid-level position with a regional investment firm. "Thought you might appreciate knowing he's landed somewhere suitably." "Modest," Olivia explained with a mischievous smile. I laughed, genuinely amused rather than bitter. "Phoenix in summer seems appropriate somehow." We moved to the dining room, where Daniel insisted on opening the champagne with proper ceremony. He raised his glass in a toast. "To Rebecca Morgan, the Phoenix of Beacon Hill, who rose from the ashes of betrayal stronger than before." I laughed, touched by his sentiment if not his phrasing. I prefer to think of it as simply claiming what was always mine to begin with. My company, my capability, my confidence. "And that's exactly why you've succeeded where James failed," Olivia observed. "He was always taking what wasn't his. You're building something that truly belongs to you." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, touching on company matters. Daniel's children's school achievements, Olivia's latest consulting project. For the first time in memory, I felt fully present, engaged in each moment rather than calculating its impact on James's reputation or career. "You seem different," Olivia noted as we lingered over dessert. "Not just happier, more authentic somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. For years, I shaped myself to fit into James's life, his world. Even my thoughts weren't entirely my own. I'd automatically consider what James would think before forming my own opinion. Now. I gestured with my wine glass, searching for words. "Now I'm just me. No filter, no performance." "It suits you," Daniel said simply. Later, after they'd gone, I stood in my home office, looking at the framed cover of the Boston Business Journal that had arrived earlier that day. My photo was prominently featured with the headline, "The Woman Behind Everett Capital's Renaissance." Not James Morgan's wife, not the woman who took revenge on her husband, simply the leader who had transformed a company in crisis into a stronger, more ethical institution. The journalist who interviewed me had asked if I harbored resentment toward James for his betrayal. The question had given me pause, forcing me to examine my true feelings. "Resentment implies that I still give him power over my emotions," I had finally answered. "The truth is, I'm grateful for the wake-up call. Without the shock of his betrayal, I might have continued indefinitely as the supportive wife, never realizing my own potential. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most necessary beginnings." Looking at my reflection in the window glass, I hardly recognized the confident woman who had given that interview. She bore little resemblance to the elegant, but ultimately, decorative corporate wife I had been for so long. The following morning, I arrived at the office early to find an unmarked envelope on my desk. Inside was a brief handwritten note in familiar handwriting. "Rebecca, I've honored our agreement to the letter. All assets transferred, all legal challenges withdrawn. I hope you'll consider this the conclusion of our business. For what it's worth, I've been following Everett Capital's performance. Your ethical investment strategy was bold. I wouldn't have had the courage to make such a dramatic shift. It appears I underestimated you in more ways than one. James." I read the note twice, searching for hidden barbs or manipulative undertones, but found none. Just a simple acknowledgement of reality from a man finally facing the consequences of his actions. Without hesitation, I dropped the note into the shredder beside my desk. The past was finally, truly behind me. That afternoon, I held a company-wide meeting to announce our expansion plans. A new satellite office in New York, focused specifically on ethical tech investments, and an enhanced analyst training program to develop the next generation of financial talent. As I outlined the vision, I could feel the energy in the room, the collective excitement of a team unified around a meaningful purpose rather than merely chasing profits. This was what James had never understood, that true leadership wasn't about dominance or personal gain, but about creating something larger than yourself, something that would endure. 5 years from now, I concluded, when people think of ethical investment management, I want Everett Capital to be the first name that comes to mind. Not because we're the biggest, but because we're the best. Because we've proven that principles and profits can coexist. Because we've created a new model for what a financial institution can be. The applause that followed wasn't just professional courtesy. It was genuine enthusiasm for the journey ahead. As I looked out at the faces of my team, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I'd experienced before. This was real success, not measured in dollar signs or magazine features, but in purpose, integrity, and positive impact. James had thought he could replace me with his secretary. Instead, I had replaced him with myself, the self I had always been beneath the supportive wife's smile, the self that had been waiting for this moment to emerge. It hadn't been the life I planned. But standing in the company I now truly owned, leading the team I had assembled, pursuing the vision I had crafted, I realized it was the life I was meant to live all along. One door had closed, painfully and unexpectedly. But in its place, a world of possibilities had opened, all mine to explore, on my own terms, in my own way. And I had only just begun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.